On the morning of the 18th of May, 1927, the children of Bath, Michigan walked into a school that a trusted man had spent a year turning into a bomb. By 9:30, the north wing of the building was gone, and 44 people were dead. 38 of them were children. It remains the deadliest school killing in American history, and the man who did it was not a stranger. He was the school's own treasurer. Bath in the 1920s was a small farming township 10 miles from Lansing. Quiet fields, a scatter of houses, and one thing everyone was proud of. In 1922, the district had pooled its money and built a modern consolidated school, gathering the children of a dozen scattered one-room schoolhouses under a single roof. The Bath Consolidated School. 2 stories of brick, a bright new future for a poor township, and a tax bill that came with it. That tax fell hardest on the farmers, and one farmer took it as a personal wound. His name was Andrew Kehoe, 55 years old, a farm on the edge of the village, and a mind that never let a grievance go. Neighbors knew him as clever with machines and cold with people. A man who once beat a horse to death for not pulling straight. He was precise, endlessly precise. He wiped his tools clean and kept his fences perfect. And he counted every dollar the school district spent. This is one of the few photographs of him, the face the town trusted enough to elect him treasurer of the very school he was already planning to destroy. Because the treasurer's post gave him something no one else had thought to guard, a key, and a reason to be in the building whenever he liked. He volunteered as the school's handyman. Repairs, wiring, odd jobs, no charge to the district. Everyone thought it was thrift. It was access. Through the winter of 1926 and into the spring, Kehoe worked alone in the basement, after hours, where no one came. He bought explosives the way a farmer buys supplies, a little at a time, from different sellers, nothing that raised an eyebrow. Dynamite, and hundreds of pounds of pyrotol, a cheap incendiary surplus sold the farmers for clearing stumps. He carried it into the school in small loads, and hid it in the crawlspace beneath the floors, packed against the wooden joists, directly under the classrooms, under the desk where the children would sit. He ran wiring through the dark underfloor, joining charge to charge, until the whole north wing was a single connected machine. And to set it off, he chose an alarm clock, a cheap tin clock, wound and waiting in the dark beneath the schoolroom floor. All through those months, above the wiring, the school year went on. Lessons, recess, the ordinary noise of a building full of children. No one heard the work below. No one imagined that the quiet handyman was building a grave under their feet. By the spring of 1927, Kehoe's own life was collapsing. His mortgage was in default, his farm slipping away, his wife Nellie gravely ill. He had lost, and he had decided that if he was going down, the town would go with him. He set the date for the last week of school when the building would be at its fullest. The morning of the 18th began at the farm. Sometime that night or dawn, Kehoe killed Nellie and left her in the yard. Then he went through his farm methodically, wiring the buildings, the barn, even binding the legs of his horses so none could escape the fire. At the fence by the road, he left a small hand-stenciled sign. We will come back to what it said. A little before 9, he set his farm ablaze. The smoke pulled neighbors and firemen out to the edge of the village, away from the school. At the school, the day was ordinary. 200 children at their desks, the morning lessons underway. Beneath the north wing, unheard, the tin clock reached its hour. At 8:45, the floor of the north wing lifted on a wall of fire, and the roof came down on the rooms below. The blast was heard for miles. A column of dust and debris stood over Bath where half a school had been. The men who had gone to fight the farm fire turned and ran back toward the village, toward the sound. What they found is beyond the reach of any photograph, so we will not try. The rescuers dug into the rubble with their bare hands. Farmers, mothers, shopkeepers, the whole township clawing at the broken brick, pulling the trapped free where they could. 38 children of Bath died that morning, and 2 of their teachers with them. But Andrew Kehoe was not finished. About half an hour after the blast, he drove up to the wreckage in his truck, its bed loaded with scrap metal and one last charge of dynamite. He called the superintendent, Emery Hike, over to the truck. Then he fired a rifle into the load and set it off. The second explosion killed Kehoe, the superintendent, and several more of the men who had come to help. And it was only then, searching the ruins, that they understood how much worse it could have been. Under the south wing, still wired to the clock, lay some 500 pounds of unexploded dynamite and pyrotol, a second charge meant to bring down the rest of the school. It had failed to fire. Only that failure kept the toll from doubling. Out at the farm, the buildings had burned to the ground, and on the fence by the road, the little sign still stood. Stenciled by his own hand, it read, "Criminals are made, not born." His whole defense, nailed to a fence, addressed to a town he had just buried. There was no manifesto beyond that. The inquest could find no cause but the tax, the foreclosure, and a hatred that had grown in silence for years. The jury ruled that Kehoe had acted alone, of sound mind and deliberate purpose. There was no one left to punish. Bath did the only thing it could. It buried its children, and then it rebuilt. A new school rising on the same ground within 2 years. Today, a small park marks the spot, and the old school's cupola stands there alone, saved from the wreck, as a memorial. Nearly a century on, no attack on an American school has killed more. And the most chilling detail is still the simplest, that it was built, quietly, by a man they had all trusted.